So we are down to the last week of August. So it's been 3 weeks of Wikathon and it's been very painful for my wallet. Because all of you over at BookTube and Twitter has been tempting me to keep buying a lot of books and no regrets. All of these, they all sound really good and I'm judging that based alone from the covers. So week 2 and week 3 of Wikathon, I was able to read 6 more books. And I could have read more, but yeah, my problem with the Tagalog book is it's really not easy for me to go through. But at least my second and third week for the month has been so much better. I've read really good books and I've also read a not so good book. So I started with a horror book and I continued on and read the rest of my horror books just so I won't kill off the vibes that, the feel that I'm already reading something horror. I might as well go and continue to feel some horror. So the second book I read for Wikathon is The 29th of February by Cruzate, and it was really good, especially since I found out that it was originally a Wattpad book, and I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. For a horror book, it's more gore, which was fun, and it did have its horror moments. The only thing I didn't really like about it is how there was a lot of repetitiveness. There was a lot of lines that just kept repeating, and then there was also scenes that was too repetitive for my taste. I think that's because of how it was originally a Wattpad book, and I'm guessing in Wattpad they release chapters weekly. So there would be, I guess, I'm not sure if it's a standard in Wattpad, but how authors would, I guess, to remind the readers what have happened in the previous chapter, they would repeat some stuff in the second chapter, but I don't know if that's how it goes, but that's what I felt while I was reading this book. Especially the part where there's a character named Tims who is a lesbian, and almost every scene that Tims is in, it's almost always pointed out that the lesbian, the words used there is the lesbian. It's like the author is trying to remind the reader that this character is a lesbian. I can see why that has to be done if it's a serial release, like every week, and maybe for the last chapter or for the previous week, this character didn't show up, so maybe for this release, for this chapter, there has to be some sort of reminder, I guess. But this is a published novel. It's a book. And it's not weekly, so people who read it now will most likely read it, finish it in a day or 2 or 3. So I think that had to be something that had to be edited out or probably changed. So yeah, that's one thing that I wish was changed before it was published as a novel. But as a whole, I enjoyed it. And there were even parts that really scared me. Not really to the point where I would be afraid to go to sleep, but there were parts when I did read it in the middle of the night when I was alone and there was nothing but silence around me. So my imagination really went off, and it was a really fun part because I had to keep looking and check if there wasn't anything else around me. So yeah, there were really parts of the story that really made my imagination go wild, and I enjoyed it. Also, I liked where it went for the ending. I'm not gonna spoil, but I liked where it went. It's actually very typical Filipino horror formula. Although the title is in English and the first view, the prologue, maybe, I think that's the prologue, it's in English. The rest of the book is in Tagalog. Let's see. Trigger warning. And since I said it's typical Filipino horror, there's rape, there's murder, and would it really be a Filipino story if there's no cheating? Because apparently that's something that can't be done away with Filipino stories. And then there's also torture. Yeah. So there's rape, murder, torture, mutilation. A lot of elements is more on the gore side of horror and not really the supernatural kind of horror. I mean, the supernatural part is there, but it's more gore. But it doesn't mean there's no supernatural. So yeah, That was the second book for Wikathon. The third book I read for Wikathon, Tabi Po by Malonzo, and I think this is where I found out that maybe comics isn't for me anymore. When I was a kid, I grew up reading comics first, Marvel comics, and then not so much DC, but for most my memory is Marvel comics. I enjoyed it back then, but now it seems it just feels short for me. I gave it 3 stars and it was fun. The art is good, but it's not really to my taste. So my other problem with Tabi Po is that it's a very male comic. I mean, the artist has no problems at all with writing a woman like completely naked with the guts out. There's a whole page just right at the very first few pages. There's a woman there. She's sprawled one whole page. She's sprawled there with her guts out and she's completely naked. Nothing is covered. Whatever can be included in the frame, it's all there. So I expected right from the first few pages, you can tell this is going to be a mature comic. I mean, it's right there. It's written on the cover that it's a mature comic. The thing is, when I say it's a very male comic, is that the artist goes to that length, to draw a female, all naked and everything, all out there, but takes pains to cover up a male penis. It's like, you have no problems drawing a female with her guts out and everything out there laid out in that one big page, but when it comes to a male, you cover up the lower half. I'm not saying that I want to see penises right there drawn there, but I mean, if you're gonna do that to a female character and take pains to cover up a male character, my problem here is consistency. I'd want to show you that page, but let's just keep it PG here. And I know not everyone wants to see gore, but that page, that really jumped out for me. When I was flipping through the pages of the comic and then I saw that page, that woman who had her guts out and she's completely naked, and it just set the mood for me that this is going to be really gory. And it is gory. The pages, the comics is gory. It's just that I didn't like the message that it's only gory if we're trying to torture a female here or something. I don't know. And then it just doesn't, it's not consistent. That's what I noticed with male artists. They have no problems with drawing completely naked females, but once it comes to a male, they try their best to put shade on the lower half of a male. Like, okay, I'm not even gonna pretend I understand what they're thinking about, but that's that. It's not, I was looking for consistency, and that's something I noticed in comics from long ago, and then apparently it's also true in our local comics too. But to be fair, I haven't read that many of our local comics. I haven't read that many comics anymore, so yeah, there's that. Anyway, so I gave that one 3 stars, and there's probably someone out there who would appreciate the comics more than I did. Would I read the second and the third book? I might, if I find a copy. I think I might, just for curiosity's sake, because the concept and the execution is actually really good. And it's one of those stories that give life and new meaning to our local to our local myths. So I think someone out there will appreciate more than I do. So yeah, there's that. So the next book I read to keep going with the horror is Tragic Theater by J.M. Coronel, which was adapted into a movie which I haven't seen. And I gave this one 2.5 stars out of 5. It's written in English. The writing is really easy to get into. And yeah, I've started and finished it in one day. But I gave it 2.5 stars because the plot just felt everywhere for me. I don't know. I couldn't really care about the main character. And again, the same formula with first few horror books I've read, because there's rape, again there's murder. This one's a little more on the supernatural than the gore compared to 29th of February. So there's that. What I didn't like about it is that the author took a little too much space in the book to write out prayers. Like, there's paragraphs of prayers. And again, the same problem I had with 29th of February, there was a lot of repetition. There was even a part where a whole paragraph is just the prayer. And since this is published here in the Philippines first, even if it was published internationally, I don't think it matters that you have to write out the whole prayer, which a lot of people are already very familiar with. Okay, to be fair, there are people who are not familiar with it, but I mean, come on, paragraphs and paragraphs of just the prayer, it would have been enough for me if it was just written there that the priests were doing an incantation and maybe a start of the prayer and not the whole prayer itself filling up the paragraph. I don't know where the author was going with it. It just, since it was familiar to me, I just skimmed it. Okay, prayer next, and just repeat lines of prayers that I already know. Just a simple one line was enough to tell me that they were doing this prayer. Or maybe just saying that the priests were doing this and then a few lines of the prayer would have been enough. But, author went and really put the whole prayer there. And yeah, I think that was a little too much. It took up more pages than it should have. And I wish that those pages would have been dedicated to giving more presence to the main character, because after all that, I couldn't care about the main character. And I did not like the style that the author was going for with I think the author was trying to make it exciting by having lines there that will make the readers look forward to something. The author would break off a line, like a sentence, and then the author will not finish that sentence. And I think the author was going for the reader to guess or make conclusions out of that sentence or something. I don't really know, but I didn't like it. It didn't jive with me. It felt corny and it didn't really got me curious. The following chapters didn't satisfy me at all, and I just wanted the whole story done. Nothing was really mind-blowing, or nothing really made me want to flip the page because I want to know what that curious line was supposed to mean. But I wanted to flip the page so I can just get it over with, not because I was curious. So there's that. And then the ending, man, that was bad. If you're looking for horror, I wasn't really scared. I wasn't really scared with the story until the very last part. The last part was where my heart was starting to race because finally something interesting. So the writing is there, but the placement of the flow of the plot just didn't get me invested enough to care for the characters. And then the ending part, I mean, you just know that the author has potential. But then at the ending, the story just ended with, you just know that there's a second book. I think the author was going for that, I know something you don't, but I'm not going to tell you until later. But it just fell flat, and that's the thing, that the payoff was just not, it did not feel worth it for me. The payoff, that's the thing, because see, the last chapter of this book, it's a letter type, and I'm a sucker for letters, so that's why I really enjoyed this part. Unfortunately, I did not like how it ended. I felt frustrated. I really felt that it's an opening to a second book, but this story as a whole was just not satisfying. I want to read the next book because of how this last part was written, but at the same time, I'm scared that if I read the next book, I might not be satisfied with it again. If this one book can't satisfy me, the next book might just leave me hanging with no satisfaction again. So, see the last part? The very last line? I'll just read it because it's not even a spoiler. It's... For a long time, Father Marcelo remained motionless. 3 dots, and in disbelief. That's it. That's the last line. I don't... It just... To sum it up, the writing is there, it's easy to get into, the characters aren't really... I felt lacking in the characters, and There was too much repetitiveness of something that could have been cut down to get the story flowing, and the plot was a little too clunky for my taste. And it just wasn't satisfying. The ending was not satisfying. It had promise, but I wish it went somewhere better. There's just a lot of plot lines that never got resolved in this book. That's why I wasn't really happy with it. So yeah, will I watch the movie? I might. It got me curious about the movie. I might watch it. I enjoy Filipino horror movies. Would I read the next book? I might, but it's not gonna be my priority. So the next ones I read after Tragic Theater is the Janus Silang series. I haven't really heard about this series until I think just this year. I've seen it somewhere probably around social media last year, but I never really heard about it until this year. And a lot of people kept saying that you need to read this, you need to read this. If you like video games, if you like Philippine mythology, you need to read this. I had my reservations because it's in Tagalog, and I think it's clear enough that me reading Tagalog is just, it takes a lot of effort. I can read it, but what I can read in a day in English would probably take me 3 days at least if it's written in Tagalog. So that basically is what happened when I read the Janus Silang series. But it was so worth it, although it gave me a lot of headaches because there were Tagalog sentences that were just a little too deep for me. And I had to, lucky for me, in this day and age, we already have Google to ask for translations, but I even came across some lines that not even Google could help me. And context clues, thankfully, I just had to let my imagination go wild and assume what some lines meant. But yeah, and the one thing I did not like about this series is the same problem. I don't know, is it a Tagalog thing? There were a lot of repetitive lines again. This is something I don't know, maybe is it only because it's written in Tagalog that I'm a little more observant of it? Because I don't know, because maybe I'm used to reading English, so I don't notice if something is being repetitive in English. But yeah, so far, except the comic, so far the Tagalog books I've read has consistently have lines that get repeated and repeated and repeated. And I don't know if that's a writing style or I don't know. But anyway, the first book of the Janus Silang series, si Janus Silang at ang Tiyanak ng Tabon. So that first book of the series was really good, but I gave it 4 out of 5 because of my only problem was the repetitiveness of the lines, and it was hard for me. But despite all that, I really love how there's a lot of layers to the plot to this. It started out as something about video games, and then a lot of people will be attracted to this because of the premise that it's about video games and all that. But really though, it's not, the story is not really central. I don't think it's central to the video games itself. It's actually more on the Philippine mythological creatures. That's where the core plot is actually, and not really the video game. The video game, Tala, I don't really know how to read that, if it's Tala or something, but it's reminding me of that dance, that famous Tala thing. But anyway, first few chapters will make you think that this is about the video game. In a sense, it is. But for me, I think that the video game concept of it is actually just a side plot. It's not the core plot. I don't think it is. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Because that's how I perceived it. That it's just a side plot, and the core plot is actually about the Philippine mythological creatures. And what I really, really like about this is the author is redefining what we understand of our mythological creatures. It's not only Tabi Po was doing that. Tabi Po by Malonzo was bringing life and new meaning to our Philippine mythology creatures into this new age. But what the Janus Silang series is doing is something whole new level. That's I'm really impressed. I was impressed and happy with what I read in Tablay because Philippine myth and mechas, that just whoa. But then Janus Silang comes in and it's a whole different level. If it was written in English, I would have read it faster. But I'm also glad that it's in Tagalog because there are just some things that just doesn't sound as good or just doesn't deliver as well if it was written in Tagalog. And I was really blown away by this book. And yeah, the only reason I'm only giving it 4 stars is because of how difficult it was for me to get into because of the writing, and it's also because of the series of Tagalog books that I've read that just got repetitive. That's the only reason. But if I take that out, if I ignore the repetitiveness of lines, I would give it 5. Unfortunately, I can't ignore the repetitive lines because it just really jumped out of me. But aside from that, it was really good. I wish it was translated into English because I know a lot of people would enjoy this story, especially those who don't understand Tagalog, but also a lot of people I know who do not like to read in Tagalog because the layers of the plot is just And then book 2 happened, and I just flat out, this is 5 stars. This is 5 stars. I need book 3. Unfortunately, we don't have any. I can't find book 3 anywhere. Book 4 is everywhere. But I am not skipping book 3. Hell no, not after how book 2 ended. You are not making me skip book 3. Because book 2, if... Damn. Then... I wish I have book 3 with me right now. It's just ending of book 2. There are parts of book 1 and book 2 that dragged a bit because there's a lot of info dumping. And I think that was necessary because it laid its groundwork for what happens at the end of book 2. Without all those info dump from book 1 and book 2, the end of book 2 would not have that much impact for me. The thing is, if someone's going to ask me, what is Janus Silang like? First few chapters of book 1, I would say it's almost like Ready Player 1. Almost like it. But now that I've finished book 1 and I've moved on to book 2, and like I said just a while ago, that I don't think the video game is the central plot. It is nothing at all like Ready Player 1. I cannot think of a book that's similar. I don't know, maybe you can say Shadowhunters, the Cassandra Clare, someone like that, where there's teenagers with mystical powers and all that. But Janus Silang series is just way above that. I don't know what international book is like it. I can't think at the top of my head what is like it. And the thing is, it's mythological creatures, and I guess you can find maybe a vampires versus werewolf kind of book that you can probably compare it to, but vampire and werewolf books pale in comparison to how Janus Silang goes. It's just, I love stories with a lot of plots, like layers and layers of plot that just pays off in the end, and that's what this series is doing. And I'm very excited to get to book 3. If only someone out there would please sell their copies, maybe. I need book 3. I need book 3. If you've heard Janus Silang a lot of times and you're hesitating to buy it, don't. Just get it. Get it, all of it. Get book 1, get book 2, get book 4, and then maybe help me find book 3. And oh yeah, and I saw Kat from her bookish side tweet about not anyone mentioning about how the series actually goes into horror mode. That's what a lot of people forget to mention, that it's film myth and the title alone says Tiana. And then yeah, there are scenes where it gets rather creepy. So if you're sensitive to horror stuff, I don't think you'd want to read this at night alone, or even at daylight alone, because there's that. That was a string of Tagalog books, and although it was a lot of exercise for my brain, I wanted to read something in English so I could go faster, and I was going to go with a light novel, something light and easy to read. And for the life of me, I don't know why, but what I did was pick up this instead. Yeah, if you're going for a light read, this is not it. But I have no regrets. I love that book. I love that story. I was so curious what people meant when they said it's very Filipino. First chapter, just from the first chapter, there's baybayin right there. And I get curious. I don't like to read synopsis. I prefer to just get books and then dive in. I didn't read what it was about. Based on Twitter, I just know that this world is set in the Philippines that was not colonized. A what if Philippines was not colonized by the Spaniard. So it's very, very Asian. First chapter, I saw the symbols by baybayin, and I just knew I need to get my pen and notebook out. I'm gonna write this. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but from what I've observed through Twitter, the author is also someone who plays a lot of video games. The author is someone influenced by video games. And I'm not gonna say I don't like the label gamer, but I've played a lot of video games in my time, and you see symbols like that, you're gonna think this is gonna mean something. I'm not sure if it did mean something, but so what I did was I was reading. I don't really journal. I don't really put tabs on books because I prefer to sit down, get immersed, and just finish a book. But what I did, since I saw a lot of mentions how it's very Filipino, I thought, why not put tabs? See from those tabs how Filipino this book really is. So yeah, back to the baybayin. I wrote on my notebook and translating what those symbols meant. I saw a somewhat pattern. There is a pattern. I'm not sure yet if it means anything about how the chapters are going, or I'm just making conclusions. I'm not sure, but it added a layer of fun for me, figuring out if those symbols and the meanings meant something else. I'm still figuring it out, but yeah, while I was doing that, translating what the symbols meant, I felt like I was a little child learning. Possibly it's just for that, but I don't know. But anyway, tab. I don't know, if you can see that one, those green ones, they're all Filipino cultures. I mean, the subtle Filipino traits, or I don't know if it's subtle, but I'm just gonna say subtle. They're the Filipino things, the culture, the habits, the Filipino stuff. That's just right there. That's a lot. Look at that. Just look at that. The green ones. Those green tabs. Those are the stuff that I picked up that for me jumped out and just screamed Filipino. And one of those include eating with the hands and sitting not on chairs, because if not for the Western influence, we wouldn't be sitting on chairs. We'd be sitting on pillows, would be sitting on the ground. Magyaka. And that was really fun. There's even games. There's even a part there where the mother would fold a piece of paper, and there's the paper boats and then the paper frog. And it brought back a lot of childhood memory. That's something that just really jumped out for me. Like, I remember that. I remember doing that when I was a child. And it was a lot of fun to read about. Because finally, this is an international book. It's not a book that's just circulated around our country. It's written in English, and the author is in Canada, but it's still very Filipino. There's even a character whose name is Lamang. I'm not sure if the character was deliberately named after the epic hero Lamang from Biag ni Lamang, but there's that. He's there. And when I read it, it's like, oh, Lamang. I was just thinking about this guy. And then, there. I was thinking about reading old epics if I can handle it. Probably not. But, just playing at the thought of my head. And then I read this book. I read this adult fantasy that's published internationally. And it's definitely very Filipino book. And then other stuff, the other thing I flagged here, that's a lot of green stuff. But the other stuff I flagged, there's the pink ones are the lines that I like. And then there's the blue ones, there's only 2. Oh yeah. What I like, there's one I flagged that I really like. It's something I haven't really noticed in other fantasy books, or it never really jumped out to me. I guess I'm more attentive while I was reading this, but it's really that common. It's addressed where a multilingual character is corrected with how they pronounce a word, And it's right there in this novel. There's a scene there. It's pointed out that the main character is fluent with this language that is not her first language, but she is corrected by another character. See, there's a line right here that says, "You're not saying that right." The difference, with this book, I'm more convinced that there are different languages in the story. That it's not just different language, but different pronunciations, different way of saying things, and that how even if you're multilingual, it's pointed out that if you're multilingual, you can say things that may not sound right to someone whose first language is that language. You know what I mean? I don't know, I appreciate that a lot, because if you're multilingual, no matter how good you are with that other language, there's just a different way of saying that other people whose first language is that language you're speaking will pick up, and they will know that you're doing it wrong. And a lot of other fantasy books, they don't address that. Not really. It's not that common that, at least for as much as I've read, it's not that common that a character would be corrected on their pronunciation. They will be pointed out that you're not saying that right to me. And then I had another part here that it's the only orange tab. I don't know why, but I tweeted about this, and it kind of felt like a Mean Girls reference. I don't think that was what the author was going for, but yeah, that's really the first thing that jumped out for me. I can't help it. I gave this book 4.5. Despite all that, I gave it 4.5 because the 0.5 is from me not being so sure of the characters. There are characters that I'm not so sure of. But I think that's how, it's because of how they are written. I think that's just how they are. The author was going for a strong female character. It's a different kind of strong female character because we're reading from the first person point of view of the main character. Outwardly, she's feared. But since we're reading from her point of view, we can see how, even at her age, she's clearly sheltered. She's clearly still naive and unprepared. And even she says that. And she's highly aware of that, but not totally aware. Like, I'm not sure. She's different. And it's just, I don't know, it felt just different. The 0.5 I took away was just my uncertainty of the things that weren't very familiar for me. But I'm still putting it as a 5 on Goodreads. One of my favorite parts of this book is how raw the fighting style is. Other fantasy books you read, YA or adult, doesn't matter, but there's always too much acrobatics. The main character, I think Queen Talion is maybe 27 or 28, I don't trust my math, but she's around that age in this book. But the fighting is so raw and it's believable. It's not like those other books where the character is maybe 17, 18, or maybe even 20 and they're all acrobatics. And let's say a female character who's small and not that tall taking on 3 male characters. Is that even... I know it's fantasy, but it's not believable. No matter how powerful you are or how well trained you are, if you're female and you're going against 3 big men, and then with all the flying around, jumping around, and whatever acrobatic, it's fun to read, but it's not that believable. And in this book, you can see Queen Talion just struggling with one big guy. She doesn't even go head to head. She finds ways, and she knows that she is skilled, but she's not going to take chances just because the other guy looks not trained. And then the fighting is just so raw. The characters pick up chairs and throw it, and then they just punch and elbow and kick balls. And yes, we need more ball kicking. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to read. I mean, that kind of action is... I didn't know I wanted more of that kind of action. There's no finesse. We have a lot of that in fantasy. Finesse with all the... I'm sorry, Sarah J. Maas, but with all that blades singing and whatever. I don't even know why blades are singing, but there's none of that here. And I guess I had enough of those fancy footwork and the fancy fighting or whatever. And with Wolf of Oren-Yaro, there's none of that. The queen The guards, anyone, even the thugs, they just go punch. And even the well-trained ones, they get hit. They get pummeled too. They don't lose, but they get hit. And that's more realistic. And I like how the stabbing is just stabbing. There's no fancy character go tumbling and whirling and doing fancy and like, okay, you could have gotten hit after all that dancing around. There's none of that here. There's no dancing, just fighting. Like, I feel the punch and I feel the stab, and there's blood, and it's really right. I liked it. I enjoyed it. As the same with Janus Silang, there's a lot of layer to the plot. It's not a direct main character wants to do this, so this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. No, it's like it's all a jumble of plot on top of plot on top of plot, and then by the end of it all, not even getting yet to the end, you're still somewhere in the middle. I did not know who to trust. I saw Gerald tweeting saying that reading what happened to Talian was so exhausting. Like, give the girl a break. And I feel that, you know, can't a girl get a break, please? But no, every turn, even while I was reading it, it was so exhausting in a good way. Like, while I'm reading it, the next page, what now? Not again. And then when you think you just cannot trust anyone in this book, and then you see someone you trust, and no one is clean. Every single chapter, you just cannot trust anyone. You can't trust anyone, not because of just who they are or what they represent or what they've done in the past, but because of where the story is going. I mean, friend or foe or friend, or everyone wants something out of something. No one really is doing just because they want to. They're doing things because they're getting something out of it. Throughout while reading, you just know that if this character is not getting something out of this, that's a big question mark. You really have to watch out what's going to happen next, because people will not do something for nothing in this book. As a whole, I love this book. It's definitely very Asian. There's a lot of convergence of a lot of Asian cultures mixed into this, but it's definitely very Filipino. And I wish a lot more people would read this. I'm excited for book 2. And fortunately, I'm one of the few people who has a copy of book 2. So watch out for that. This September, oh yeah, book 2 is gonna be a lot of fun. I have a feeling we're gonna get a lot more people dying. I love it when someone dies in a book, in a story, especially if you didn't see that coming. There's a lot of that. So if you're gonna read this book, don't get too attached or don't like people. You're gonna hate them by the end, or they're gonna die. It's either you hate them or they'll die. Unless, of course, you're the main character. And also, something that's really, really good about this book. It's told in first person by the queen. And right from the very beginning, I am very convinced that she's talking to me. I feel like I'm reading her diary. You know, like she's telling me this is what happened before. So I can only assume that she lives by the end of the 3rd book. It's a trilogy, so I think it's only 3 books. So I'm going to assume she lives until either by the end of the 3rd book, she's the only one who's left alive, or she dies and then someone just compiled her diary. Yeah, the whole time, just from the very first chapter, I felt like I was reading her diary. It's like she's talking to me, telling me her story, and I really like that writing style. It just goes to show how good this author writes. And I'm excited for book 2. And you should all watch out for it this September. Because you're gonna get more people dying. And who is gonna die next? That's exactly it. And yeah, I still have to go figure out if there's any meaning at all to those bye-bye symbols. So that was how my week 2 and week 3 for Wikathon went. Obviously, I enjoyed it a lot, and my wallet did not enjoy this month at all. I bought a lot more books, and I bought way too many books for this month. Since January until June, I have avoided book hauls because I said this year is the year where I'm going to save up. This year is the year where my unread books will be down to just one level or down to just a few books left. And then Wikathon happened. The number of books I bought between July and August, it just hurt my wallet. But there are no regrets. Yeah, these are some of them I bought after I saw people post about them on Twitter and BookTube, and they all sound so interesting. On my first video for Wikathon, I was looking for a Bisaya book. I saw someone talk about a Bisaya book. I did not find a copy. I found it's printed in Cebu, and the publishing that sells it is not replying, so I don't know how I'm gonna get a copy of that. But chances are I'm not even gonna have any time to read it anymore. But the same person who mentioned that Bisaya written book also mentioned this one, Hello Universe by Erin and Trada Kelly. And that one apparently has a character who speaks Bisaya. And it's an English written book, so I'm not gonna expect to be long lines of Bisaya, but it's there, at least a few lines. And I'm excited to get to that, to read that. And I'm happy because usually when international books want to inject a Filipino character into a book, it's usually someone would be speaking in Tagalog. I want to read that next, but I'm currently reading Bone Witch because for once I want to join in on the TRIHOES live show where I actually read the book. They're really entertaining and you guys should watch that live show coming this August 30, last Sunday of the month, around 7 p.m. plus 8 GMT or Manila time. And yeah, I'm currently reading the Bone Witch so I can actually join in and not mute when there's a spoiler coming. So yeah, after Bone Witch, I'll be going for Hello Universe, and then I don't know if I still have. You got 1 week left. I'm not sure how many books I can read in the 1 week. Maybe 2 more. But just because Wikathon will be ending, that doesn't mean I'll be stopping reading more Filipino books. Just because the event has ended doesn't mean you should stop. And that's a lot of books. And then there's even a lot more I haven't ordered. I have 1 more package coming. But that's my last order for... Hopefully that's my last order for the time being. And there's a lot more books out there that I haven't discovered yet or haven't bought yet. And Wikathon is great for finding out that we're getting a lot of stories representing Filipinos now. And the other books I got, for non-fiction, there's these 2 I got from UP Press, which they finally are on Shopee, and actually bought this a long time ago. This one, actually one I always wanted to buy when it was released, but it sold out really quickly. Yeah, this book, Some Days You Can't Save Them All, is written by a physician. And the other one that's also from UP Press, Surgeons Do Not Cry, it's also about healthcare in the Philippines. And I work in healthcare, so I'm definitely gonna review that so I can see and tell you guys if, even if you're not working in healthcare, is it worth reading? And I have a feeling it is. I have a very good feeling it's something that every Filipino needs to read. Then, I got some Bob Ong books. MacArthur, I'm sure you guys know who you are, who kept repeating this book to buy it, and then after seeing it a lot, I just knew I had to get it. This is a second-hand book. I can't find it brand new anywhere. After my string of horror books, I was talking about it on Discord in an international book club, and a friend over there mentioned that maybe I should try this one, Babong. It's Ang Mga Kaibigan ni Mama Susan. She said that if I want horror so badly, one that will satisfy me, I should go for this one. And yeah, so that's 2 Babong books. Both of those Babong books are secondhand, and I don't know why I can't find brand new Babong books. I don't mind. They're really good condition anyway, so that I don't mind. And then this one, these are 2 books I got from National Bookstore. The Girl Between Two Worlds and The Search for Adarna by K.M. Levis. I heard about The Girl Between Two Worlds, I think it was around 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. I was actively looking for Filipino books, but not online, because although I love tech a lot, I'm a little old-fashioned, I guess. The me 2 years ago went looking for Filipino books in national bookstores, and I think I've already mentioned that in my previous videos a lot of how bad they display our local authored books. But I saw this book, this one. I think it was a different cover then, I'm not sure. But I saw that and I didn't buy it because of how tattered it was. And there were two books there. There was another one, a smaller book of about the same color. I can't remember the title, but I wanted to buy those. But they were so tattered, so I just gave up on it. I mean, I'm not paying 200 plus pesos for something that looks like if it's been thrown on the ground a lot of times. No. And it's a Filipino authored book, so I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it. I even thought that it was written in Tagalog, even more that I wasn't hesitating on buying it. So I didn't get it. But it's not. It's English, and I was in National Bookstore a few weeks ago. I saw it, and then I've been asking for it. I've been telling National Bookstore and Fully Booked that where's your support for our local authors, and there it is. So I bought it. And I also saw someone over at, I think it was Instagram, I saw someone post about it, and then it reminded me that, oh yeah, I was looking at that. I wanted to read that book years ago. So there you go. When I was in National Bookstore, it's like the universe telling me that, didn't you want this book? Weren't you looking for this one? And to my surprise, just a few days before I bought it, I was thinking, after reading all those books with Phil Myth stuff, it got me thinking about Ibong Adarna. I thought, why hasn't anyone written their spin on Ibong Adarna? And then, of course, when I got to National Bookstore, there was this. Universe is listening. Or is it Google who's listening? So, yeah, that was an auto-buy. I don't know the author. I haven't really heard of the author or the books, except for the other one. But when I saw it, I saw the word Adarna, and I just knew, I'm gonna get that. I hope I like it. And then, there's these two. I also got, which I already mentioned. I mentioned this one, which I'm gonna read after Bone Witch. And then, I don't know, it's just one of my habits that if I'm gonna order online, why am I gonna get just one book when I can get two? So, I got another. It's both from Fully Booked. So I also got that. I know it's a lame excuse to say that I can save up on shipping, because now instead of paying just 300 plus, I have ended up paying almost 1,000 pesos. Yeah, so there's that. And then lastly, this book, I should have read this for the first live show of the TRIHOES, but that's my latest purchase. I did not want to buy this. It's got tanning in the pages. It's tanning, and this is actually, there were only 4 copies, and this was the best that was on display. And yeah, if I'm just holding this right here, I feel the dirt. I can feel it. It's clearly something that's been on the shelf. I saw this last month, the same 4 copies in our only national bookstore within 100 kilometers. And I swore to myself that if it's going to still be there by a month later, I'm gonna get it, because it's our only local bookstore. And if you're not gonna support that, if they're not gonna earn through the books, they're gonna stop selling, and I'm gonna be stuck with buying online. It's just different when you're actually there in the bookstore. I could have gotten a better copy online without the tanning pages, but I feel bad for our bookstore. It's the only proper bookstore that I know of. And so yeah, I bought that book. And sadly, I don't think anyone else is buying books from there, especially with the pandemic and all, but I hope they won't close down. So yeah, those are the books I have and I've bought for Wikathon, and the books I plan on reading, if I can still read them in the last week we have left for August. And hopefully we'll have a better September ahead of us. So see you guys next video.